about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa. They say he died from heart disease after his wife passed away from a rare infectious illness.
The world was shocked when Hollywood star Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their Santa Fe home, weeks after they had died. As the cops dig deeper, they find strange signs that someone knew about their deaths before anyone else. Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann, is now the center of attention. Was she involved with something much worse than anyone thought? What was she hiding, and how far did she go to cover up the truth? The answers might shock you. There was silence in the house. The door was just barely open. Mail had been left outside for weeks without being touched. Someone in the neighborhood knew something wasn't right and called the cops. Officers showed up to check on the person's well-being, expecting the normal. Inside, they found something very strange. Gene Hackman's body was found near the kitchen, slouched over in a way that didn't make sense. He didn't touch his shades as they lay next to him, like they had just fallen off his hands. Betsy Arakawa's body was found in the bathroom. There were pills all over the counter. The sink's water had dried out, leaving behind a thin film. There was no blood. No breaking in. There is no sign of a fight. 2 healthy dogs were running around the house while one was dead in its crate. There was a problem. The bodies were not brand new. Skin had grown tighter over bone. The breakdown had slowed down. It was already time to start mummifying. The police found out that Gene and Betsy had been dead for weeks. The air inside the house was old and had not been moved in a long time. Food that was long gone was sitting on the counter. It felt like time had stopped. The police had one scary question left to ask. How did 2 people, one of whom was a Hollywood star, get away with it for so long? The answer came from a strange place. Gene Hackman's pacemaker had saved the last action it made. The info was checked by investigators. That made everything different. Gene might have died on February 17. If that's the case, the house has been quiet for at least 9 days. There were no calls for help. Nothing to do. No one is coming in. Still, something didn't make sense. Why was Betsy in a different room if Gene had passed out? Why didn't she call for help if she was still alive after he died? More and more questions came up. There was a small gap in the door. Had someone been there before the cops showed up? Had someone meant for that door to be open? The lab reports showed up. There was no carbon monoxide overdose. Not an overdose. Not a clear cause of death. There was no more to find out about it. Then, something new was found that made the case different. Their records showed that Gene Hackman's house had been watched. Someone had been watching the house for weeks before he died. There was movement picked up by security cams. Strange things were happening on the phone records. Tracking with GPS showed some strange trends. Before the cops arrived, someone knew what had happened. It was a surprise that the digital trail went straight to that person. The daughter of Gene Hackman. The investigation changed its target. The evidence didn't back up what she said. She said she had talked to her dad a few weeks before he died. The phone records showed otherwise. There were problems with the financial activities. The investigators looked deeper. They found out something even stranger. There was more to this than just his death. It had to do with money. Documents from Gene's estate had been changed before he was found. Before it was even proven that he had died, someone tried to get his money. There was strong proof. Things were going badly with the case. Was Gene Hackman's death really an accident, or was someone planning something sinister long before he was found? When police looked at Gene Hackman's pacemaker data, the case took a big turn. Before going quiet, the device had recorded one last movement. It was clear from the timestamp when everything stopped. Everything changed on that date. Investigators looked for signs of life after that day. They looked at his phone records. No calls. Don't text. No searching the web. His money activities were stopped. No bank logins. No purchases with credit cards. It looked like he had just disappeared. Then they found something else. Security cams on a nearby property caught people moving around outside of Hackman's house. There was a shade near the door. A car was left parked in the street for hours. Inside the house, motion sensors picked up on strange behavior at odd times. The front door was never opened, though. Someone was looking, but where were they? The police looked at his home security system. The logs showed something that was not good. Before he died, the bell had been turned off and on several times. No breaking in. Do not call the emergency services. But something didn't make sense. Every day, Hackman did the same thing. Every morning, he took his dogs for a walk at the same time. He looked at his mail. He paid his checks. His life was very routine and easy to plan. Then all of a sudden, nothing happened. The police dug deeper and found his last digital traces. His last writing. His last search on the web. His most recent call to someone else. Each one finished quickly. Not a warning. No farewells. Then, another hint showed up. Cell tower data showed that there was a strange phone signal near Hackman's house. The number wasn't registered because it kept bouncing between towers, hiding where it really came from. The signal showed up the night before his pacemaker caught its last beat. There was someone there. Someone knew what took place. Betsy should have called for help if Hackman had been having a medical problem. There was no call, though. Why didn't she leave the house if she was still alive after he died? Why didn't she tell anyone? The police looked at her bank records. On February 16, there was only one small trade. It was small and didn't mean much by itself. But now we see it was just a digital footprint, a sign of life before everything went dark. That day, Hackman and his wife both passed away. Who had been watching them was the real question, though. Detectives looked for someone who could get into the house. Someone who wants to get something. That's when they changed their attention. The records of the spying had caused some doubt. They were now going to tell the truth. What did she hide? It wasn't clear at first who Leslie and Hackman was. People had been interested in the strange timeline, the surveillance video, and the data from the pacemaker. But as the police dug deeper, they found something that changed the whole case. Police said she had last talked to her dad a few weeks before he died. She said that everything seemed fine. There were no signs of concern or strange behavior. But when police looked at call logs, they didn't find any calls, texts, or anything else. The last time she was seen or talked to by her father was a lot longer ago than she had said. The facts didn't back up what she said. Investigators looked at her bank records. They were expecting normal business deals and spending habits. They found something strange instead. She had already been talking about her dad's fortune before it was official that he had died. There had been questions with the law. There were questions about inheritance at a time when no one outside the family thought Hackman was lost. Then there were the papers that had been changed. Someone looked at papers that had to do with Hackman's assets. Some important facts had changed. The time could not be ignored by the police. The situation wasn't just strange if these changes were made before February 17, they were planned. The government began to ask the tough questions. Did she know something that other people didn't? Had she been getting ready for something to happen before it did? What she did sent up even more red flags. When the contradictions were pointed out to her, she became defensive. It became less clear what she was saying. She didn't know why there were no records of the calls she said she made. She couldn't explain the money transactions linked to her name. Then, another strange fact came to light. Hackman's assets were discussed with a lawyer, which was the day his pacemaker recorded its last movement. But no one had publicly said he was dead at that point. He was gone for so long that no one knew. So why was someone moving things around on his land? The time was getting closer to her. Do you think she knew anything about his last days if she was trying to get his money? Hackman's death was no longer the only thing being looked into. It grew into something bigger. Money. Fraud. Deception. The proof pointed to more than just a terrible accident. Every time something new was found, the walls got closer together. The pieces were starting to fit together, and soon the police would find something that would change the whole case. A secret was about to come out. And there would be no going back once it was known. When the autopsy reports came back, they didn't answer any questions, instead, they made more. Gene Hackman's body didn't look like it had been hurt. Not any bumps. There were no broken bones. No scars for defense. There were no signs that he had been attacked or that something violent had happened. The same thing could be said about Betsy Orokowa's body. There were no marks, signs of a fight, or anything else that led to foul play. The first idea, that the person was poisoned by carbon monoxide, was quickly ruled out. The air, the gas lines, and every other possible cause of a leak had all been checked by the authorities. Nothing. There were no signs that the couple had been around anything that could have killed them quietly. After putting that idea to rest, investigators had to deal with a new issue. What killed them if it wasn't direct harm or poisoning from the environment? The reports on toxicity came next. Don't take pills. Not any barbiturates. We saw no signs of an overdose. At least on paper, their systems were clean. Later, though, the police saw something that didn't make sense. There weren't enough of some medicines that should have been in the house. Gene Hackman had trouble with his heart in the past. He had been through medical processes before. He was taking medicine to control his illness. But those scripts were not found when the house was searched by police. It wasn't just a case of bottles getting lost. If he ran out of his medicine, there should have been proof that he got more. But there weren't any. There should have been extra pills around the house if he had stopped taking them. But there weren't any. It looked like they were taken away on purpose. Investigators started to think about a scary possibility. What if Hackman's death wasn't caused by something outside of him, but by something much more sneaky? It's possible that someone made sure he never got the help he needed. An attack or carelessness can both kill. The autopsy reports show that the same thing could have happened if someone had not given him his medicine, stopped medical help, or let his situation get worse without taking any action. Not a fight. Not a shock. It's just a slow, unavoidable fall. Authorities then looked at Betsy's pills that were lying around. Why hadn't she taken them if she had been having a medical episode? Why didn't she ask for help? Maybe she wasn't strong enough to do anything. Or was there something or someone that made sure she couldn't? Everything changed when the medicine went missing. It showed purpose. It pointed toward a planned action rather than a bad accident. Now, the police weren't just looking into a sad death. They were thinking about the chance of a well-thought-out plan. And that plan was built around someone who had everything to gain. Almost right away, the fight for Gene Hackman's estate started. His wealth, built up over decades of success in Hollywood, was now tied up in lawsuits. Even before he died, investigators found suspicious activity involving his assets. But when they looked at his will, they were really shocked. There were blank pages. Important information had been changed. Before Hackman was even officially pronounced dead, someone was tampering with the documents. It was impossible to avoid the time. The paper trail was full of Leslie and Hackman's name. She had been wondering about her dad's money for a long time before his body was found. Her lawyers admitted that she had tried to make changes to estate documents, but there was a catch: she wasn't allowed to. However, papers and transactions showed that someone had been preparing for the transfer of wealth for a while now. It was put together by the police. The will had been looked at, changed, and sent to a lawyer for review while Hackman was still missing. It was clear that Leslie Ann was involved. Were they being smart, or did she already know that her father was dead? Legal experts disagreed about the changes. Some said the changes were made to get a bigger share of the inheritance, while others thought there was full-scale fraud. If Leslie Ann was getting ready for her father's death, what else was she getting ready for? The legal fight got worse when the missing pages, financial problems, and inheritance claims came to light at the worst possible time. The prosecutors began to put together a case. There was a clear trail of money. There was more to this story than just estate rights. It was about lying, greed, and how far someone would go to get a wealth. As the case went to court, Leslie Ann Hackman was about to hear a decision she did not expect. As the estate battle heats up, Leslie Ann Hackman's shady behavior raises troubling questions. The study was now mostly about Leslie Ann Hackman. Too many red flags had been raised by her involvement in the estate fight. The police needed to know what happened, so they kept an eye on her 24 hours a day. Every step was watched. Every phone call, email, and financial activity was looked at. What they found made them feel bad. Her bank record showed a story she hadn't told anyone. There were alerts for transactions. The cash had been moved to different banks. There were some withdrawals that were made in amounts that were too small to be found. It looked like these changes were made at an odd time. There were some things that happened before Gene Hackman was even said to be dead. Private emails were read by investigators. Messages sent to lawyers showed something scary. Leslie Ann had been talking about her estate before there was a reason for the public to know about it. On paper, her father was still alive when she talked to lawyers about estate claims. It was like she had been getting ready for something she knew was going to happen. Even more information was given by phone records. The timeline showed that she had talked to financial experts, moved assets, and tried to move legal proceedings forward while everyone still thought Gene Hackman was living. She did things that would only make sense if she was sure her dad wasn't involved anymore. Bank payments that were not seen were the most damning proof. A forensic audit showed that huge amounts of money were quietly moved into private accounts. Some of these moves went to offshore banks, which made them harder to track. Leslie Ann had been moving money around for a long time before she should have had access to it. It was no longer just a guess at this point. The evidence from the surveillance, the financial records, and the legal inquiries all led to the same result. It wasn't just a daughter dealing with her grief taking care of her father's business. This was a carefully thought-out plan for making money. There was no denying the proof. One person was linked to bank records, surveillance footage, and changed legal papers. Before her father was even officially pronounced dead, Leslie Ann Hackman planned a way to make money. The investigation found a pattern of lying, cheating, and getting in the way. It was now time for justice. They called the police. She was caught, charged, and jailed right away. The prosecutors didn't waste any time. The case went through the court system like a well-thought-out puzzle, with each piece showing how she tried to trick the system. The pages that are missing from the will. The early land claims. The moves that were not seen. The schedule was very clear. She was getting ready for Gene Hackman's death for a long time, even before anyone knew he was dead. The decision was made quickly. Due to the verdict, she lost all rights to Hackman's estate. She was found guilty of multiple counts of theft, financial manipulation, and obstruction of justice. Every dollar, every asset, and every formal link to her father were taken away. Her name was taken off the inheritance for good. She put everything she had on a plan that fell apart right in front of her eyes. There was nothing left now. No money. She has no right to her father's heritage. Goodbye for all time. But even after the sentence was given, there were still questions. What really happened in Gene Hackman's last days? Did Leslie Ann just take advantage of the chance? Even though the case was over, the secret still lived on. And some people thought the whole truth hadn't been told yet. The truth behind Gene Hackman's final days may never be fully known. What do you think really happened? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click the next video popping up on your screen.